I'm Darryl Baird. I am originally from Dallas, Texas. I grew up in Texas, originally born in Oklahoma, but we moved there when I was 5, so I'm a Texan. And I stayed there and worked commercially, and then ultimately I decided I didn't like that work, so I got out and went into the academic side of photography, and I started teaching after graduating in 1998. So I've been teaching ever since then at the University of Michigan-Flint, where I started the program. And I've done a wide variety of work since then, and it's almost all in some way or another about the history of photography. I've been extremely interested and in love with the history of photography. So most of my work is sort of centered within that piece. The work that is the strongest visually graphic work that I've got is called postmortem. Postmortem being, of course, after death. And it really started with just Mother's Day flowers that stayed around too long, started drying up, the stems would corkscrew, they would droop. I just thought they were beautiful, and so I began to look at other plant forms literally after they'd been cut and kept for a while, and saw what that looked like, and found that it was something I was really curious about across the board of all animals and plants, but plants are probably the least gross, so they were the most accessible. So I just started gathering plants and photographing them, and simultaneously I photographed them on a film that had been discontinued. So it was basically a dead film, a Polaroid negative film, Polaroid 55, which is 4x5 sheets. So I bought as much as I could afford and dedicated it to that one series. So it's a dead film of dead plants. And I've had to change the title of it a few times because it was shown in hospitals and they didn't like the title. So I changed it to Deconstruction. But it's still postmortem to me, and it always will be. There came a period in my earlier period as a photographer, I was doing commercial work, trying to do a little artwork on the side, but they're really two masters, and they really can't be satisfied. So I became really disenchanted with photography. It became disenchanted with me. I'm not sure which, but I made good money, then I didn't make good money, then I made good money, then I didn't, and it was like, oh, I can't keep doing this. And I decided that I would try to do something else, and I had taught a workshop for a local gallery, and people said, you did a really good job, you should consider doing this, you should teach. And I thought, So I did, but I didn't do it the right way. I went to a PhD program and not an MFA program, and I started taking a history of ideas and history of aesthetics courses, and that's where I got so many ideas. And then at some point within that study, I became frustrated because I couldn't get the records I wanted, and in frustration I started making art. And that art became a series called Transcending Loss, and it was really influenced by writers and not photographers. And digital cameras didn't really exist back then. I had a scanner, and I began making images from scanned images and layering them together using an early version of Photoshop. So this was like 1994, 1995. And the work was really complete by 1996. I switched schools and then created new bodies of work, and then graduated and went on to teach, and I've taught ever since. Well, the genesis of the Transcending Loss series really began as I was a student in a microhistory class, and I was trying to work on a crime that represented the times, and it was the last public lynching of an African American in Dallas, Texas, in 1917, Allen Brooks. And it was such a wild story. It was such an unbelievable story. And I was so upset when I found out that the jailhouse records had burned in a fire, and I couldn't get my primary sources to finish off the job. So I began making art. I'd been playing around with Photoshop, I'd been playing around with images, I'd been a photographer all my life, and I just began making work. It was like I was Rip Van Winkle. I'd been asleep for 20 years. I woke up and I was pissed. So the image that I started with is called The Alternate Past, straight out of 1984, George Orwell's foretelling of kind of what we're living today, and it's talking about altering our history so that we don't believe it anymore. It doesn't affect us anymore, and I think it's an incredibly vital image to exactly what we're living through right now. The last work, or the most latest work that I've been doing, is really return to my earliest days. First lens I ever bought was a macro lens. I did micro work in the 1980s, and I did abstractions in the 1980s. As an aside, it was a crazy period. When I wasn't working, I'd get out my camera and I'd photograph things like Scotch tape, Swiss Army knives, little tiny objects, and do crazy things with them. So fast forward to today, and as challenges go, abstraction in photography is about as good as it gets as a challenge, because you're not allowed to be abstract. You're always required to sort of show some level of realism. So I've decided that I'm doing abstract realism, and it's just as easy a jumping off point as anything else. But the question that's always asked is, what is it? Because it's not recognizable. That pleases me and terrifies me at the same time. The history of photography is one of recognizable objects, things, people, places, events. And everything that I'm doing is painterly. It's very much like that, but it's molten glass, rock slices, tiny little pieces of things. I'm sort of getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but making the prints bigger and bigger and bigger to sort of, be hyperbolic with the idea that these are things you don't see. You can't see them, but I'm making them visible again through photography, and that really is cool for me, because it's it's the world of the microscope, or something close to it anyway. I'd like to invite everyone to come down to see my show. It's at Dotson'S. It's in the month of February. I was invited to do a show here, and I thought, well, nobody really knows me in Oregon because I'm not from here, and I just moved here 5 years ago, and I've been on the coast and hunkered down. So here's my new work, and my old work too at the same time. That's why I call it Continuum. It's a continuum of everything that I've been doing for the last 30 years.